France depth chart, folks. This is the second depth chart we're having a look at. If you remember, we already looked at the Irish depth chart. What do I mean by depth chart? We're looking at all the players France used in their 2022 year. Which guys got the most minutes? Where are France looking strong with depth? Where are they kind of over-reliant maybe on one player? We'll go through the players, the positions, the minutes and whatnot. You guys can let us know your thoughts. How was their record for 2022 and what was kind of the most selected French 15 across the year? And yeah, we'll basically go from there. Obviously, France's year was pretty good and then they won every game. I think they were, 10 from 10 in their campaign. Some people have criticised France a wee bit, saying, you only went to Japan and played 2 games. You didn't go to like South Africa like Wales did, or you didn't go to New Zealand like Ireland did. You went to Japan and played 2 games, and one of the games got pushed pretty close. But you can't take it away from the French side, man. 10 from 10, and their overall winning streak is even longer than that. It's been a pretty good campaign. Next year will be a big test for them. Obviously, Six Nations time, and then a home World Cup. But certainly, I think you'd have to say 2022 was about as successful as it could have gone. Players for France, how much different are we looking from 2022? How is Fabien Galthié on that kind of spectrum of, I like to pick the first 15 and give all the minutes to my starters, or I like to rotate players in and out every week to make sure I've got kind of strength and depth? Well, I think he is leaning slightly more towards the consistency side. However, we need to remember when they did tour Japan, they left many of the big guns at home. Obviously, a long top 14 season means some guys need a rest, and Galthié is kind of happy to give it to them. So he's maybe not as consistent as we saw from the Irish squad. But anyway, we'll have a look. We will start with the front row, the most important positions, 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, the old loosehead prop, is remarkably consistent from last year. Cyril Bay is still the main guy. That is the same case as last year. Jean-Baptiste Gros is still the second guy. He's there in blue. Danny Priso in yellow, and then Reda Wardi in purple are a couple of changes from last year. They used a bunch of different guys for kind of minimal minutes last year. But it's still the main 2 guys, Bay and Gros, the 2 main guys for France, and that kind of continues on. I think that looks relatively healthy. Your main guys had around about half of the game time, the next guys had about a quarter of the game time, and a couple of other guys have had some international action as well. For hooker, it's a little bit more reliant on the main 2 guys, which is Julien Marchand there in green, and Pietro Malvaca there in blue. Those guys have been, that's the same from last year. Those were the 2 guys for Galthié, and that continues on. Bougari is there in yellow. He got a bit of game time over in Japan, but was otherwise very much relegated to that 3rd spot, as you can see from the amount of game time he got. So more than half of the game time is going to Marchand. It's kind of hard to argue with that because Marchand had a phenomenal year. So why would you not play him? Barlow is one guy who we saw last year who didn't really make an appearance. They played a lot more hookers last year. I think they played 6 guys. They're down to 3 this year. Like guys like Camille Shah also got game time last year. Totally seemingly out of the picture at this point. So, yeah, it's been refined a little bit, I guess, as we build into a World Cup. And then tight head is a little bit of a change from last year. Actually, if you look there in green, that's Uni Antonio. The big unit that is Antonio has been a big performer for France this year. Around about half of the game time has gone to him. Whereas last year, Mohamed Hawass was their number 1 guy for minutes at tight head. And he is still there, but he's all the way up there in purple. He got very kind of minimal game time this year. You got Bamba there in blue, and then Falatia there in yellow. So there's been also kind of like loosehead, a wee bit of a mix. It's very similar, those 2 columns, 1 and 3. There's not that much between them. Same number of guys, just slightly different amounts of minutes there between them. But I mean, overall, that French pack, it's been known for getting pretty large, and I don't think they get pushed around much up front. So if you're a French fan looking at the guys you've got lining up in that front row, I think you would be largely pretty satisfied. The second row is one where we have seen a fair bit of change, especially in the number 4 jersey, the one who's usually packing down behind the loosehead prop. Cameron Woki has been the guy. I think they used 9 players last year in that position, and it was, I think Bernard Leroux was the main guy. Ribage also had some minutes. Girassi, I think, had some minutes, either at 4 or 5. But it's very much the Cameron Woki show. Like pretty much 2/3 of the game time has gone to him. So that's more than what we saw from any of the front rowers. And then Flamand is there in blue. So between those two guys, that is absolutely the lion's share of the game time that's gone to that second row position. And Flamand will also appear in the number 5 column as well. So he's one of those guys that splits his time between two different kind of sides of the locking duo. Levant and Verard are there as well, but it's mostly the Woki show, like I mentioned. And they do use him very much as that kind of athletic jumper, very disruptive at line-out time, very secure on their own ball. So you can see why they have him there. And then when you're looking at the number 5 jersey, you're looking less at that kind of athletic side, maybe a bit more of the old brute force side, especially when you see the first two guys that are there. So Paul Willems is there in green with about 1/3 of the game time, just over. He's a big unit. I know he spent a bit of time on the sidelines. And then Romain Tafafanua, a little bit less game time, but still another big solid unit. So two big bodies to partner the kind of skills man that is Woki. But then I mentioned Flamand. Flamand appears there in yellow. So he's blue on number 4 and yellow on number 5. So if you're looking at Flamand, he's played just under half of the game time in the second row this year for France. There are some people who say if you play Woki and Flamand at the same time, your second row is looking a little bit light. But Willems is certainly a big guy. But actually, I thought Flamand and Woki made a decent duo when they did play in those autumn tests. You've also had Jomez and Chouleroux as well, appearing kind of briefly. Jomez on the Tour of Japan and then Chouleroux at the end of the year. So another couple of options, but yeah, the five is the one that seems mainly mixed. Woki is absolutely dominant in terms of being Fabien Galthié's guy in the number 4 jersey. Back row is the one area I would say France, compared to last year, are very consistent. It's pretty much the same faces. It's not like we've seen a prop get a debut. We've seen locks get debuts. The loose forwards have been pretty much the same faces we've seen last year, and pretty much the same guys. So last year, Gillon was the main guy who got minutes in number 6. That continues on even more so. Look how much game time Gillon has had at number 6, so pretty much 3/4 of the game time. Olivon was your guy at 7 last year. Despite the fact that he was injured for much of the year, he still had the most minutes of anyone in the 7 jersey. That continues on this year, about half of the game time. And then Aldrit, goodness gracious me, another guy, 3/4 of the game time there at number 8. Absolutely continues on this year. So Gillon, Olivon, and Aldrit, same as last year. Very much same. Who are the other guys who've been around the blocks? You've got Francois Cross, who appears a couple of times. He's there in blue at 6 and at 7, so he's kind of very versatile. Remember, France tend to play at left-right rather than open side, blind side, so Cross is kind of happy to go either way. And then Cretin as well, he's there in yellow on 6 and 7 as well. So those guys seem to be like the backup and then the backup to the backup, whereas both of those guys, I think, especially Cretin, had a fair few more minutes last year, but part of that was due to Olivon being out for as long as he was. Other guys you've had pop in, Diallo has popped in a little bit, Cameron Woki even dropped into the back row ever so briefly, but yeah, it's largely the same faces, like I said, as last year. And then other guys they have tried number 8. Tonga actually is one guy I should say we did get to see a little bit of in that Tour of Japan. Obviously, Aldrit's got a lock on the number 8 jersey, was genuinely one of the best players in the world, I think, in 2022. Just carrying the ball. Work rate is massive. Continue on for France, but Yohan Tonga, we did get to see him in that Tour of Japan when Aldrit didn't go, so he's there in blue for number 8. So that's pretty pleasing. They did build a little bit of depth there. Gillon is there in yellow for number 8. He played a lot of number 8 last year, but pretty much exclusively on the flank this year. I remember he went to that Tour of Australia and played a fair bit of number 8. So yeah, a bit of a change. Tolofua and Makalu also there kind of briefly at number 8. Makalu is a bit of a weird one. We'll get to him when we get to the outside backs as well. He is the ultimate versatile guy, but yeah, long story short, with the loose forwards for France, they're obviously spoiled for depth. I mean, as I said, Aldrit's been phenomenal. Olivon at the breakdown and in the air, very, very dangerous. And then Gillon just seems to be able to do literally a bit of everything. Yeah, I think they're looking pretty well stocked. And the fact that they haven't made huge changes indicates that Galthié seems to be pretty chuffed with how things have been going in that area of the park. For the backs, there's a little bit of changing. Dupont is obviously the same guy at number 9. There's no changes there. He gets more than half the game time, which is absolutely to be expected. Although what we have seen is a change in his backup. So last year, it was Kuyu who got more game time as the backup, but then Luku was the third guy, whereas this year it's flipped. So you can see Luku's there in blue, getting about a third of the game time, and Kuyu kind of living off scraps, although I think he did have one good cameo from the bench over in Japan. And then likewise, number 10 has also shifted a wee bit, because remember, Intermark spent a large part of last year out injured, so Jalibert had a lot more minutes, whereas this year it's absolutely dominated by Intermark, 3/4 of the game time more or less going to him. Jalibert living on about a quarter of the game time in blue, and then Astoy getting very, very token minutes. I think again, was it the Tour de Japan? I feel like it must have been. So yeah, as far as starters go, Dupont and Intermark is about as world class as any team can boast right now. And then Jalibert certainly a very capable replacement. If you miss Dupont going into a World Cup, I mean, Luku's capable, but obviously Dupont is that kind of generational player that I don't think anyone can quite match at the moment. Some of the guys who've fallen off the team, I think Serran got a bit of game time last year. I mean, wrong end of his career to probably be getting any minutes with Galthié at the moment. Carbonell also got some game time last year at 10. Not in the picture at the moment. So, yeah, like I said, Dupont and Intermark, you could do worse. Let's hope they stay fit going into a World Cup. The midfield is one where there's been a bit of a change as well. Remember, Vincent last year in the 13 jersey was very present, but he has had an atrocious run with injuries. I think he missed the Six Nations with injury, came back, and then missed the end of the year with injury as well. So that's a real pity, because he was playing some really good rugby. So what that does mean is we've got two fairly stable guys in Donti at 12 and then Fiku at 13. Fiku, I think especially, has had a great year. One of the best kind of, I think, readers of the game, very defensively smart player as well. And then Donti, the big unit, has had more than half of the game time in the 12 jersey. We've also seen Moefana play both positions in the midfield as well, plus in the outside back. So he's another one of those kind of proper utility guys. So if you're looking at blue 12, that is Moefana. If he's spent any time in one position, that's the most that he's got game time in. For 13, we're looking at Vakatawa there in blue. Remember, he's had to retire due to a health condition. So those minutes in terms of like experience in the bank going into World Cup, sadly, are minutes that are gone. And then Moefana's there in yellow with a little bit of Damien Penaud as well. So the midfield, I mean, if you get Vincent Bank fit, you got Fiku, you got Donti, you got Moefana, and you got the likes of a Penaud as well. I think you're looking pretty stacked. And the fact that you've got Penaud who can play in the outside backs or in the midfield, Moefana can do the same, Fiku can do the same. That's kind of the ultimate going into World Cup, because you can only take so many players. You want guys who have played multiple positions at the highest level. It gives you that extra level of versatility. Getting into the outside backs, the last ones, folks. 11 is a bit of a mixed bag, because Gabin Villiers missed a fair bit of the season injured, but he is your main guy there in the 11 jersey, and was in phenomenal form, if you can remember, all the way back to the Six Nations. So kind of a pocket rocket, that man. I think really stepped up and took things to another level. And then Moefana has had his second most amount of game time on that left wing, so he is there in blue. You've also got Lebel, who got a bit of game time against Japan in yellow, and then you got Makalu there in purple. I mentioned we'd get back to Sekou Makalu. He tends to float between loose forward and outside back, and he's gotten a bit of game time. I think more game time as an outside back this year. One game, the game where Dupont got red carded, they had to sub Aldred. He literally switched between hanging out on the left wing, and then when it's scrum time, he just packed out at number 8. So really kind of a bizarre one, but as I said, potentially the ultimate kind of versatile player. I'm not sure I'd want him on the left wing in a World Cup final, but he's gotten some game time. He's gotten some game time at test level for that left wing spot. So he's a freakish athlete. So there you go. Right wing is the most dominant position you will see from any of the French players, and that is Damien Penaud. I think from memory that was the same case last year. That guy just seems to want to play and play and play and play. Like, he's got like 85% of the game time on that right wing. Another guy's had a phenomenal, I think he's scored like 8 tries this year. He's had an absolutely cracking year. Moefana's popped in a little bit, and then I think Makalu as well. So, Penaud very much kind of making that position his own, more so than any other position for France. And then fullback is one where I feel like France have got depth for days, because you got Jaminet there in green, who's played over half of the game time. He was the favoured guy at the start of the year. You got Ramos there in blue, who ended the year really in great form as well. And then Max Spring, who's that kind of young, up and coming player who needs a bit of a chance at international level. He did get a little bit of it this year in that tour of Japan. And then you've got guys like Dulon and Bouthier, who can't even get game time. So I think in terms of something just dropped. In terms of fullbacks, France are really, really, really well stacked. So if you're looking at the French side across the board, most positions, the leading guy has had more than half of the game time, which I think makes sense if you're trying to build a cohesive unit. And they've used, I think, the same amount of players as Ireland did. Like, we already looked at Ireland. I think Ireland used 45 players. If I'm not mistaken, France have used the same. The main difference with France being the starting guys got slightly less game time on average than the Irish guys did, and the backup guys got slightly more game time. So slightly more in terms of that rotational aspect. But I mean, as I said, Penaud on the right wing gets miles of game time. Intermac does, Aldrit does, Gelant does. All these guys are pretty much getting 3/4 or more, around about that, of the game time. So there's certainly the guys who've got a lock on their jerseys as well. The main starting 15 for France this season by Marchand Antonio, as I mentioned, it's a cracking front row. Woki and Willems, I do like that combo with the big unit. I mean, Willems is a big guy. And as I said, Woki's skill set at line-out time especially has proved invaluable. Gelant, Olivant, and Aldrit is also a really balanced back row. I think they have caused a lot of problems. Like Xavier up against Aldrit, if that's what we get in the All Blacks France World Cup game next year, that's going to be worth any price of admission, I think. Dupont and Intermac, like I mentioned, a pretty world-class 9-10 combo. Dupont, I think, is maybe the hardest guy to replace in the side, just in terms of the pure drop down to the next guy. I don't mean to give Luku any grief. But Dupont, I think, like the drop from Intermac to Jalibert, you may even say it's not even a drop. Some people would rate Jalibert higher, whereas I don't think anyone's going to argue the same is true for the 9 jersey. Danty and Foucault, as I mentioned, proved a pretty good combo. The big unit and the skills guy, and then Villiers, Penaud, and Jaminet is the main guy at fullback. Jaminet, I think, a lot of talk made of his goal kicking, but wasn't maybe as on song as we have been led to believe his goal kicking can be. So the World Cup, obviously, games are won and lost sometimes on the kicks at goals. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of continues on, because there's certainly other fullbacks who offer more of an attacking presence than Jaminet, but maybe don't have the boot. So there you go, folks. That is the French depth chart. If you are sitting there and suddenly feeling all excited about French rugby, looking at all those names, check out Lovell Rugby. They sell French gear, all kinds of it, jerseys and tank tops and jackets and balls and all kinds of stuff. So I'll put a link down in the description to them. They're an affiliate channel. You guys let us know your thoughts. How well do you think the French side is looking? Do you think their strength and depth across positions is looking safe as we go into a World Cup? Do you think there are any positions they do need to rotate a bit more? Any of the injured guys that you can see, maybe like a Bernard Leroux forcing his way back into the side, like Arthur Vincent, all these kind of guys. But you guys let us know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.